Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Museums Association Members Together online event on communicating climate justice. Thank you to everyone joining us live today and anyone watching this as a recording. So my name's India Divers. I'm the Policy and Ethics Lead at the Museums Association, and I'll be chairing today. My pronouns are she, her, and as a visual description, I'm a white cis woman in my early 30s with dark curly brown hair. Before I hand over to our fantastic lineup of speakers, I have a few housekeeping announcements to run through. Firstly, if you require closed captioning, then you can turn this on now via our menu bar. You can either select show subtitles for real-time subtitles or full transcript if you want to see the session in its entirety. Please do keep your mics turned off unless asked otherwise, but feel free to leave your cameras on if you like. We also encourage delegates to introduce themselves in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. So the event will remain open until we close at 3:30. So if you need to leave or your internet drops out, then you can rejoin again via the waiting room. A subtitled recording of this event will be shared with delegates along with the chat transcript. And we will also ask attendees to feed back your thoughts about the event via a quick evaluation survey. So please do keep an eye on that email coming in. We will have a Q&A with all the speakers once they have all spoken. So please also start thinking about what questions you'd like to ask them and put them into the chat function. We'll also be using breakout rooms in the last part of today's session, which will give you an opportunity to speak with each other, meet other members, and reflect on your own practice. Finally, all attendees and speakers are reminded to follow our code of conduct, which helps us to create a safe and welcoming and inclusive space and experience for everyone. So the Museums Association's Climate Justice Campaign supports museums in tackling the climate and ecological crises. And today's event looks at how we can raise awareness about these issues and activate communities to create change. We have three amazing speakers today, and I'm now delighted to introduce our first, Kinvara Jardine Paterson, who's Education Director at Project Everyone and MA Climate Champion Trustee. And she is a communications expert specializing in youth, education, and climate action. So over to you, Kinvara.
Thank you, India. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. It's great to be here. I was first asked to, sorry, I'm just going to share my screen so you can see it. Is that, oh, sorry. Is that okay? Can everyone see? Can everyone see my screen, India? Is that?
Yeah, that's great.
Fab. I'm going to do a quick overview of what I'm going to talk about between the next 8 to 10 minutes. I'm going to give a bit of an overview of understanding the context of where we are right now in the UK and the conversations around the climate and nature crisis. We're going to spend a little bit of time around talking about depicting the future. We're then going to move into looking at what the data tells us in the UK with what we know works to inspire action from our audiences. And then I'm going to share some quick resources, which I found really helpful for preparing for this conversation today, but also in the wider work that I do. So to start with, I wanted to pause and take a moment to reflect on where we are right now and what the current media landscape looks like, what you might be thinking about or talking about with your kids, what you might be feeling in your own communities. Because I was asked to talk about this 6 months ago in the summer of last summer when I came to the Museums Association board meeting. And then in the past 6 months, so much has happened. And I think it's really important to acknowledge the kind of collective trauma that people are experiencing right now. This narrative around broken Britain, how our public services are failing us, the horrifying news over the weekend, which makes it all feel so uncertain and unstable, and the constant pressures that financial pressures that people in the UK are facing right now. And I think it's important to pause and reflect on that, because when we then come in as climate communicators or trying to get a message across, it can feel like we are adding even more burden and worry to people who are already very worried about where the world is going. And I think it's very important to acknowledge those existing pressures that are happening on people's minds and brains and their attention spans before we then start to think about how we want to talk about or communicate about the climate and nature crisis. And an amazing organization whose work I'm going to reference a lot throughout this presentation is an organization called Climate Outreach and More in Common. I'll share links to their work afterwards. They asked a large majority of the UK, how are you feeling about the future? When you think about the world that our young people and future generations are going to inhabit and live in, what words comes to mind? And what you can see is that the vast majority of people are very worried and feeling very uncertain and frustrated about the future, particularly the future that their children or that their young people are going to inherit. And that is a narrative that we see happening again and again. And an article that came out earlier this year in Days magazine, written by Tom Waite, really has made me think about how we communicate about these issues and what, as the cultural sector and as the museum sector, we can do about this. And in this article, he argues or questions or asks who is in charge of imagining a better future for humanity. And in this article, he details that he speaks to lots of different experts, authors from around the world, and he looks at and details that many young people feel that their futures are being cancelled at the same time that it's simultaneously being colonized by a very small number of very rich, very powerful, predominantly white men. And there's that narrative happening at one time, but also simultaneously, there's what I find really interesting, a severe lack of competing visions to get us excited about. So a question I want to leave us with and think about and explore as we go through today is, what role can we play as the cultural sector or as the museum sector in helping to create a vision for a better future and a narrative that can start to push back on this doomism that we see continuously pummeled out to us through social media? And how can we get back to this, one of my favorite quotes from this amazing ocean activist based in and climate justice champion based in the US called Marianne Hegler. How can we get people to think about that the climate is, you can either be overwhelmed by the complexity of the problem or fall in love with the creativity of the solutions? And I'm interested and excited about how can we do that final bit? How can we get people to fall in love with the creativity of the solutions so that together we can start to imagine and explore what a better future might look like? So how do we do this? What I'm going to go through now is a few different examples of what I think, what the data tells us knows can work, and what hopefully you will find helpful for the further work that you do in your own museums. I'm going to talk briefly about three things: protecting what you love to build a better future, putting people at the heart, and knowing your audience. And so if we go to the first one, protecting what you love for a better future, this again was inspired by the amazing research and work that More in Common and Climate Outreach did last summer, where they identified that as a nation, we are incredibly proud of our natural world, of our parks, of the fauna and flora that we have in the UK. And it's actually one of the very few things that we can all agree about in the UK is this love and this pride that we have for our natural world. And the messaging around protecting what we love resonates deeply, almost with every sector of society across the UK. And what you can see right on the right-hand side is a number of different messages that More in Common and Climate Outreach used to talk about, to talk to their audiences. And you can see that they started thinking about, if we said reaching net zero, does that resonate with people? And what they found is that this phrasing or this language of saying protecting our environment actually had the vast majority of support out of people that they surveyed, that they looked at, and using this technical language around reaching net zero, which only a few people even really know what that means. I mean, I'm not 100% sure what that means, and I work in the climate space. It was a real indication of how we can lean into this messaging or start telling these stories and platforming those voices of people who are talking about protecting what we love in our environment. The second piece that I want to talk about is putting people at the heart of climate action. The number one concern for people in the UK right now is the cost of living crisis. People are really, really involved and inspired and want to take action for climate. But if they know it's going to have a positive impact on their wallets and what they're taking home with them at the end of every day, then it's going to inspire and motivate them to go even further. And so whenever we are talking about climate and the nature crisis, we have to link it back to the impact that it's going to have on the people and the communities that it serves. Positive feelings and actions for renewable energy can only be sustained if people know that the impact that they're having is going to make it easier and cheaper for them. And sometimes I feel like in the climate movement we shy away from that, but we really know that that's messaging that works. And ultimately, we are people. We're built up of feelings and emotions. And I think sometimes we can be guilty of focusing on what we want people to know instead of what we want people to feel. And when we slightly flip that narrative around and focus on what we want people to feel, we could start to craft and build stories that focus more on the emotions, that center on the people who are experiencing it, so that they feel and that they leave feeling more inspired to take action for that. And one example of that I wanted to highlight from a recent exhibition that I saw was at a Perth Museum in Scotland, who did a wonderful exhibition on flooding, looking at how it had different impacts around the world, but then also crucially to the local community. And they invited people to share their photos of what flooding meant to them and how it was impacting the farming community in Scotland as well. So this is an example of where a museum has taken a very difficult topic around an impact of the climate crisis, flooding, but really centered it on the human experience and the human impacts that it's having, and tying a very local issue to then a global issue that is also being experienced around the world. And then finally, we know now that getting your message right to the audience that you're engaging with and interacting with is more crucial than ever in today's fractured media landscape, where it seems like everyone just wants to shout at each other. We know that getting your message right is more important than ever. And again, Climate Outreach and More in Common have done some amazing work in identifying the 7 segments of Britain. And they did this first in 2020, and they've made an updated version for 2025, where they've identified that there's 7 different segments within the UK, and what messaging, stories, and media those different groups resonate or respond with is very different. So I'll post a link. I'll post a link in the chat now to that report. It's fascinating. It has tons of different ways in which your messaging can be tailored, and your stories within the museums and the galleries that you have can help to show that. So I'll share that in the chat afterwards. Some other resources that I think are really helpful, again, I'll share our Open Planet, who have a free library of footage that you can use and download and share. So I'll include that in the chat afterwards. But ultimately, to summarize, what we know works and what we need for the stories to tell for our communities and our audiences and communities coming to our museums, coming to our galleries, and as part of the cultural sector, we need to get the messaging across of that by taking climate action is protecting what you love to build a better future. And we need to understand that we have a role in talking to people and sharing with people what that vision of a better future could be, so that we start to fight the narrative of the predominant narrative of the moment, which that the future is not going to be any better than what it currently is. We need to make sure we always put people at the heart of our storytelling, making sure that we platform the authentic voices that we know resonate with our audience. And we need to make sure that we know who our audience is, because in this topic of the climate and nature crisis, there are different opinions. But what's positive and what's hopeful about that is that whenever you ask people in the UK how they feel about the climate crisis, they say they want action on it and they say they want to see more. It's just the difficulty comes when it's deciding on what that action is. So knowing what your audience are, the people who are coming to visit your museum and gallery, is going to be really, really crucial and helpful to you in curating and creating experiences that are going to inspire action for them to take forward. So thank you. I will post some links and resources in the chat now as for you to take a look at as we go through the rest of the conversation.
Thank you very much, Kinvara, for that thought-provoking presentation. I'm sure that started to spark a lot of ideas. So please do put your questions for Kinvara in the chat, and we will come to them at the end once all speakers have presented. So next up is the first of two case study presentations, and I'm pleased to introduce Hannah Crowdy, who's Head of Curatorial at National Museums Northern Ireland, and has recently been elected as a Northern Ireland trustee for the Museums Association as well. And Hannah will share some insights around last year's Wild Ireland exhibition at Ulster Museum in Belfast, which explored powerful topics around extinction.
Thank you very much, India. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. So my name's Hannah. I'm Head of Curatorial at National Museums Northern Ireland. I'm a white woman in my mid-40s with blonde hair and a ponytail, and I'm wearing a navy dress. And I'm here to talk about this exhibition, Wild Ireland Past, Present, Future, which was an exhibition we staged at the Ulster Museum in Belfast back in early 2025. And before I start, I just wanted to be clear that I myself, this isn't my specialist field as it is for someone like Kinvara, for example. I'm also not a scientist, although I'll talk about many of my colleagues who are. But I think it's quite important to have someone like me talking about this, because this is something we all have to be able to engage with and communicate about, whatever our level of expertise. So just to start, I'm conscious this event is called Communicating Climate Justice. And in the same way Kinvara talked about the climate and nature crisis, we're always careful to not only talk about climate. We talk about environmental change more broadly. So we bring in biodiversity loss, habitat destruction, pollution, etc., all of which are critical challenges. And in many ways, they can be interlinked, but they're all really important to emphasize in our work. So seems like a bit of a silly question to ask. Why is the environment important to us? Because, of course, the environment should be important to everyone, and the environmental crisis is one of the biggest challenges of our time. But in museums, we do have particular responsibilities, skills, and expertise which make the environment particularly important to us, and that is certainly true of us at National Museums Northern Ireland. So we are the custodians of the natural sciences collections for Northern Ireland. They represent our natural scientific heritage of what is now Northern Ireland. They cross botany, zoology, geology, and you can see some of the Irish fauna in our collection in the image there. We have over 650,000 specimens, plus supporting archives and records. And we recognise how these collections are big data about our natural world and about how the environment has changed over time. We are also really fortunate to have in our organisation something called CEDAR, which is the Centre for Environmental Data and Recording. It was established 30 years ago. It's a partnership between us, the museums, the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, and the local environmental recording community. And they have a really important role to play in advancing environmental monitoring and public engagement with our natural world. And the image I've got there is something they run called Stormwatch. When we have stormy weather, as happens so often these days, once it's safe to do so, they encourage people to go down to the shore and see what the storm has brought ashore from the ocean. And then we are also, we have significant sites that we are responsible for. We have two open air museums, and our site at Curatorial, where I am today, is over 170 acres. So the image I've got here is about a project we're doing called Restoring Our Woodlands. We're partnering with the Woodland Trust to remove invasive species and restore long established woodland by planting over 2,500 native trees. And just kind of quite a sobering point here, Northern Ireland ranks amongst the least wooded regions in Europe. We have just 8.7% woodland cover compared to 37% European average. So that's something really important to communicate when we're talking about this work. So environment is important to us, and we've translated that into a corporate commitment. We launched our new corporate strategy last year, and environment is one of what we call 4 impact areas. The others, if you're interested, are peace building, identity, and innovation. We say the environmental crisis demands urgent action, and our museums are part of the solution. By using our collections, sites, and scientific expertise, and by engaging communities, our museums can be catalysts for environmental action. And then we commit to how we will do that. And it's important to say that this aligns very closely with our programme for government in Northern Ireland, which has 3 missions, one of them being planet. And they say our natural environment is vital to everyone's health and well-being, both now and in the future. So this is all important to us, but we do think something was missing in terms of how we were communicating this. So the Ulster Museum in Belfast, you can see the image there, the wonderful building that we have that is part neoclassical and part brutalist. And we are known for our natural sciences collections alongside both art and history. But really, we were best known for these 3 specimens. So you've got an extinct species in terms of the dinosaurs, that's an Edmontosaurus there. We've got an animal from another part of the world that was kept in captivity, that's Peter the polar bear. And we also have a domesticated animal in terms of Patrick the Irish wolfhound. So these specimens in isolation were not giving any sense of the scale, scope, and significance of our wider natural sciences collections or our scientific work, and no connections were made with the wider environmental crisis. So we had work to do. And we started to rethink this approach to communication with Dippy on Tour back in 2018. Many of you will remember this. The Natural History Museum toured Dippy around many locations across the UK. And each location had to find a hook for this iconic loan to work and to be interpreted within the local context. And our starting point was, why wouldn't Dippy find any fellow dinosaurs in Northern Ireland? And that's because of our particular geological and climate history. And also, how has that changed since Dippy's time? And what has that meant for our environment here? So that was the concept, but we were really struggling with how to articulate that to the public. And the solution came with this local artist, Julian Friars. And he approached our curator, Dr. Mike Sims, and was saying he was doing this wildlife art. He wanted to represent now extinct species. And could Mike help him with the science behind that, looking at fossils in our collection, etc., geology, understanding the environment. And Mike immediately saw these paintings and thought they would be a fantastic way of trying to communicate to our audiences about what has changed over time here. So the exhibition, you can see Dippy there and the paintings on the wall, and they really helped us to engage audiences with wider themes of environmental change, colonization, extinction, recording, and sustainability. So that was in 2018, but really the work didn't stop there. We actually acquired a number of Julian's paintings for our permanent collection. And Julian actually was really prolific. He kept on working, he kept on talking to Mike, learning from our collections, learning from Mike's expertise, and there were more and more paintings. And so we began to plan for an exhibition which would combine Julian's paintings, our natural sciences specimens, and current scientific practice and expertise. And the aims of this exhibition were to raise awareness of the plight of Ireland's dwindling biodiversity in the face of climate change, habitat loss, and simple persecution, to highlight the importance and relevance of our museums and collections for understanding today's environmental issues, and to help further understanding of these environmental issues and encourage positive actions. And the plan for the exhibition was originally around this concept of vanished, departed, survived. So, vanished, for example, you have a woolly mammoth, which would once have lived here, but it is now extinct. Departed, we have an Arctic fox and lemming, now found much further north where it's much colder, but again would have once been found here. And survived. We have a white-tailed eagle with some guillemots there, and the eagle was Ireland's largest raptor. It became extinct by 1913, but has been reintroduced in recent decades, so it's a really good, strong, positive story of survival. And thinking about our interpretive approach, we had a relatively small budget for this exhibition, but of course we wanted it to be impactful, and this was one of our rare opportunities to be communicating directly about the environmental crisis. So our approach was to incorporate specimens from our collection to help tell the story. So you can see there a lynx and a wolf from our collection, and we also loan material from our colleagues at the National Museum of Ireland in Dublin. We wanted to use simple interpretive techniques to add an element of fun, particularly for younger visitors. So this idea of the top trumps that you had to look for. So how good were the wildlife that you were seeing in terms of attacking, running, etc. We really wanted people to learn from the experts and certainly encourage younger visitors to get involved in science and consider future careers in science. And I think that links in with what Kinvara was saying, putting people at the heart of this communication. We always do that now, that put the people who are working in this area and their expertise at the heart of what we do. And the image you can see there, that's a colleague from our Centre for Environmental Data and Recording, and she's talking about a curlew project. And curlews had been very close to extinction, but now they're making a good recovery thanks to different conservation efforts. So again, a very positive story. We also wanted to make it really up to date and relevant. So we used newspaper headlines to bring some of the challenges home to people. So some of the headlines you can see there are Northern Ireland has lost 50% of its biodiversity since the 1970s, and less than 2% of all reported waste crime incidents in Northern Ireland since 2016 have led to sanctions or convictions. And then we also wanted to make it local as well. We wanted people to step out of the Ulster Museum and further connect with the messages and understand what we were trying to say through this exhibition. So we have a really good digital team here, and they went to film the murmuration of starlings over Belfast's Albert Bridge. This bridge was always known for the murmurations, but the bridge's lighting was changed a few years ago and the birds began to dwindle. They stayed away. People didn't see the murmurations anymore. So conservationists campaigned for adjustments to the lights, and now it is really positive. The birds have returned and you can see this wonderful murmuration again. So this is just a little taste of this. And for those of you that don't know, our Natural Sciences Education Officer, he wrote some lovely interpretation for that video, and he talked about how murmurations are thought to be able to help starlings avoid predators. It helps to keep them warm and it helps them to exchange information as well. So if you ever see that, that's what's going on. And then it was really important for us to get feedback from the public on this exhibition. Had our ways of communicating these issues been successful? We wanted to understand if the exhibition had made people think differently and if it had encouraged them to take any positive action. It was really fantastic feedback overall. We got 90% of people rating the exhibition as very good or good, and 71% of our visitors who responded said that they learned something new from the exhibition. I said we had quite a low budget and we were conscious of being sustainable. So these tree structures that you can see, we had used for another project. We deployed them in the exhibition just with a really simple cutout leaf that people could fill in and give their comments on the exhibition. And people were really creative. They talked quite emotionally about how the exhibition had made them feel, but they also did lots of wonderful drawings as well. Some of the comments you can see here are about get outside and appreciate the wonder of life. And I want change. This exhibit can make people feel it too. And then in terms of continuing the conversation, the exhibition was really important for us, but the messaging and the activity can't end there. It must continue to inform the work we do. The exhibition has also gone to have a life beyond us. It's now on tour at Ballymoney Museum in Northern Ireland, which is really encouraging. But in terms of what we're doing next, we have a small exhibition about aquatic invasives coming up for this summer, and that links in with a major conference at Queen's University Belfast, which is our neighbour. We are also hoping to participate in DISCO, which is Distributed System of Scientific Collections. It's a mass new digitization infrastructure project for natural sciences collections to make them much more joined up so they can really be genuinely used as a resource to be accessed by researchers and to help inform environmental change. We also have ecological management plans for our sites. And I know my colleague Adrian is on this call as well. He's our environment and sustainability manager. And so some of the actions in those plans include maintaining and restoring our woodland on our sites, creating and maintaining wildflower meadows, and re-establishing our ponds. And also, it has been in the news. We're very fortunate to have secured funding for our Reawakening the Ulster Folk Museum project. And that recognises, probably for the first time, that the museum is both a heritage and environment resource. So we'll have a lot of programming and interpretation as that project develops, as the new museum is opened, to really communicate the importance of the site and engage audiences with the work we're doing through our ecological management plans. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Hannah. That was such an interesting presentation. I really enjoyed that sort of creative use of the trees to gather feedback. That's so fun. So maybe we'll come back and explore that a little bit later on in the Q&A. But next up, our final speaker is Matthew Sheard, who's the Head of Experience and Engagement at the Wardlaw Museum at the University of St Andrews. And he's going to share how the museum is encouraging visitors to actively make decisions that help build a more sustainable future through exhibitions such as Rewrite the Future. So over to you, Matthew.
Hello, nice to see everyone. I'm going to speak a little bit about Rewrite the Future, our Rewrite the Future project that we held last year. First, a little bit of background. So the University of St Andrews Libraries and Museums, we have two museums. Our flagship Wardlaw Museum opened in 2008, which has looked at the history of the university and its impact on the world, and it's where we have our temporary exhibitions. And we have the Bell Pettigrew Museum of Natural History, which opened in 1912. And we have varied collections covering heritage, scientific instruments, art, and we're an active collector of Scottish contemporary art, natural history, geology, archives, rare books, manuscripts, monuments, something like 2 million photographs. So a very wide collection. And climate justice is very much baked into our strategic plan. So there are 2 points in particular in that plan. So one says that we work to address institutional legacies in our collections, both through tackling biases and inequities in the past, and through strategic collection development. And that's not just about the collections themselves, but how we tell the stories associated with them, and including what we say about the climate and our planet, and whose voices are feeding into those stories that we tell. And then a second point, which says that we convene conversations on climate and biodiversity, empower our community and visitors to take action, and collect evidence to develop and share our sector-leading practice in this area. So climate justice is very much baked into who we are. It's really important. It's setting our agenda. Everyone from the director down is playing a key part in this. And in the room next door, some of our visitor services staff are thinking about ways that we can make our visitor experience more sustainable as I'm speaking to you here. So putting money into it, we're putting effort into it. Our parent university signed off on this strategy, so they're very much bought into it too, and sustainability is part of the university strategy. But another important thing to say, if we're going to really try and tackle issues around climate and climate justice, we need to be innovative. And everyone talks about innovation. There are lots of cultural organisations that say they want to be innovative. Is it a meaningless buzzword? For us, we're part of a university. A university is a key part. Sorry, innovation is a key part of what a university is about. And so as a university museum, we believe we ought to be genuinely innovative. Yes, we want visitors to see some beautiful collections. We want them to have a nice time to engage with the university's history and research. We want to offer them the very best visitor experience we can. But we also think of the Wardlaw Museum in particular as a bit of a laboratory for trying new things. And maybe wouldn't say this to our visitors, but I think sometimes of our visitors as our lab rats. Don't say that more widely. So it's a chance to try new things. And something that I believe quite strongly in, this requires permission to fail. If you want to be innovative, you've got to accept the possibility that something might not work. So that doesn't mean a culture of failure. It doesn't mean reckless and unnecessary risk taking, but it does mean forming an idea based on evidence that it will work and being open to the possibility that actually it might not. So this feeds in very strongly to what we've been doing around issues of climate and climate justice. So we've done a lot of work over a number of years looking at individual behavioural change and how we can get visitors to do something different. So it's beyond awareness raising, it's a beyond attitudinal change. We know that if we're going to tackle this problem, and it's a serious problem for our planet, we need to do things differently. It's not enough to think differently. So we've done experiments in exhibitions over about 5 years now, testing different approaches and doing rigorous valuation so we can understand whether it really is possible to change visitor behaviour as a result of visiting an exhibition. And some of those ideas have worked, and we need permission to fail. Some of those ideas have not worked, and we've learned from those as well. Some of those things that haven't worked have been as important in informing what we do as those that have. And we found that depending on which approaches we use, around half of our visitors will make at least one lifestyle change as a result of visiting. And we've got a reasonable idea of how we can do this. But we need to go further. And this is where the Rewrite the Future programme came in. That's possibly the least inspiring photograph of an exhibition you could possibly hope for, isn't it? But that's the only picture we have that has the title of the exhibition in it. So individual change is fine, but even individual change won't get us to where we need to be. And I live and work in Scotland. I'm from West Yorkshire. A couple of years ago, drove past Drax Power Station, which is Britain's biggest polluter, and thought, well, what's the point? What's the point in me changing all the lights in my house to LEDs when that? And around the same time, the St Andrews Centre for Critical Sustainabilities, which is a scholarly centre at the university, approached us and said they were interested in working with us. And they had the same idea, that individual behaviour change is really important, but it's not enough. We need societal change and we need systems change. And systems that we have at present discourage sustainability or even make it impossible for individuals to take the most sustainable actions. We can't take the most sustainable actions because society doesn't let us do so. So it led us to the question then, can an exhibition not just change individual behaviour, can it change societal behaviour, which is obviously a much, much bigger ask. So that's what we were looking at with this project. So we held the exhibition last summer, and one of our visitors shortly after we'd opened said to me, well, why is it called Rewrite the Future? The future's not happened yet, so you can't rewrite it. And that was kind of the point we were trying to make. The future isn't written yet, but it feels like it is. It feels like we're on a trajectory that we can't change, and climate breakdown feels inevitable. You drive past Drax Power Station or any other power station and think, there's nothing we can do. And so the exhibition was trying to change that. I was trying to say the exhibition is the future is not set in stone. And similar to what Kinvara was saying earlier about getting visitors excited and giving a vision for a better future, we presented 12 case studies based on research at the university that showed ways that we could imagine a better future and could change society. So one of those really important ones was bringing different voices into the conversation. Particularly, we looked at people with disabilities, we looked at prisoners, we looked at refugees, those that really are affected, sometimes quite significantly, sometimes disproportionately by what's happening in our society. And yet, those are the ones with the quietest voices, or rather with the voices that are least heard. And as a side note, I discovered through this, those seeking asylum in our country can be detained indefinitely. Even if they've committed no crime, one of them's been detained for up to 9 years. And that is shocking. I found that unbelievable. One of the things that we really need to change as a society. So we looked at the voices that are involved in discussions around this and how we make sure that any societal change works for everybody. And not just the majority. We looked, for example, one of the possibilities at cement. Cement is a huge polluter, and the image there shows a possible alternative that's been experimented on. That is a panel of pebble dash that doesn't use cement, it uses algae instead of cement. And can we use algae and living materials to build our buildings and our homes that are much less polluting? We looked at things like locally built AI and technology that meets users' needs rather than the needs of big data and rather than the needs of big technology companies. We looked at things like truth in advertising. It can actually be pretty difficult to make informed decisions about sustainability because of the extent to which advertising hides the truth and seeks to distort and manipulate it. So we have oil brands that describe themselves as sustainable. Well, can you really have sustainable oil? And this, I think, is the first time I've ever had to get legal advice on an exhibit to make sure that some of the companies we were discussing were not able to sue us for what we were saying. Or looking at shared aspects of housing, right? We each have our individual houses. That means they're bigger than they need to be. They're expensive to buy. They're expensive to run. They use a lot of energy. Can we share different parts of our houses? Can we share our kitchens? Can we share our living spaces, our gardens? So looking at a whole different range of options that could help us build a more sustainable society. And in telling these stories, we were, you can see actually there that one of the exhibits I had to get legal advice on, next to a bottle of oil there, a big box that says lies. We tried to tackle two of the key barriers that our individual behavioral change research has found stops people making decisions. One is this idea that we can't change society, the driving past the Drax power station moment. What is the point? We need optimism. We need people to buy into and see that there's a point in trying to do something different. One of the ways we did this in this exhibition was to look at examples from the past where unlikely change has happened at a societal level. So one of the examples we looked at was female suffrage, and actually it was a hard slog for women to get the vote, but it happened and it worked. The other slightly less exciting, land reform. We wanted to do CFCs, but nothing in our collection helped us to tell that story. So showing examples of how societal change has happened in the past against the odds. And then the other was this idea of, well, it's too big a sacrifice. It will cost me too much money. It will cost my comfort. I'm not willing to make those sacrifices. And again, this comes back to what Kinvara was saying about showing the impact on people. We wanted to show the benefits of change. We were also honest about some of the costs and compromises. And one of the ways we did this was through gamification. So as you went around this exhibition, in every section, you could play this game where you said what you were willing to do to help build a more just and sustainable society based on what you'd seen within that aspect of the exhibition. So, for example, you go onto this screen and you would say which bits of your home you'd be willing to share. Would you be willing to share your living room, your kitchen, your storage space, your office space, your garden, your bathroom, your bedroom, all these options. And as you make those changes in real time, you can see a graph on the screen. You can see a bigger version of the graph on the right there, where in real time, those things would change. So how just and sustainable society is, but also how it affects your wealth, your comfort, your power, and your health and well-being. So you could see the impact of those decisions, both on society and on your individual experience of life. And then when you came to the end, you would see, that's the graph on the right there, you would see what everyone visiting the exhibition wanted society to look like. And then those findings we shared, we had an in-conversation event with politicians. We shared that data and said, well, this is what people want. Why are we not doing this? And actually what we found is politicians don't actually want to talk about this thing. They're scared of these conversations, which is interesting. But we were quite surprised. So this is a photograph of the game on the final day of the exhibition. Those bars can go down. They can go red, heading down the way. And we found that our visitors actually wanted to build a quite just and sustainable society, that they were prioritising health and well-being over things like their personal wealth and their personal power. But that people were willing to make sacrifices and wanted that just and sustainable society. It would have been interesting to see the results of this if we had a different audience profile, if we'd done this in a more deprived area, for example, or in the City of London, a big financial district, something like that. But I found it really encouraging to see that people do want change and are willing to fight for change. So some headline results. 57% of people visiting were more optimistic about the future as a result. 6% were less optimistic. 48% left feeling inspired, 50% willing to make a change, 57% thought they were able to change the future, which was a big win for us. And 59% recognise that that we need a greater variety of voices when looking to build a more sustainable future. We have a lot more data and we've not finished analysing it there, but those are some of the key headlines. We found that those playing the game were more likely to make a change than those who didn't play the game, though not by as much as we thought it might be. They were also tended to be more optimistic by about 10%. They were more likely to achieve learning outcomes and key takeaways. And 62% of people who played that game said that it helped them understand the positives and negatives of the societal decisions that we face. So on the whole, an interesting learning and experience for us. Can we change society? The jury on that, I think, is still out, but we've explored some of the ways that you can. Some key takeaways then. Try and sell optimism, try and show that change is possible. That seems to have an effect on whether people are willing to fight for a better society, and try and show that there might be sacrifices, but actually those sacrifices might be worth it, and there are a whole lot of fantastic benefits as well.
Thank you so much, Matt. That's so inspiring, and the Wardlaw Museum is doing such fantastic work. We're going to come to a Q&A now with all of our speakers. We've had some questions already. Keep them coming, please. I'm going to start off with a question from myself, actually, and then we'll move on to some of the questions that have been submitted. But something that, Hannah, you touched on, the importance of communicating climate when you're not an expert. And Matt, you also spoke about that idea of giving yourself permission to fail, which I really liked. So my question is, what tips do you have for museums who want to communicate climate justice through exhibitions, but who perhaps lack the confidence in doing it, either because they worry about getting it wrong or they're worried about how audiences might react to it? So that question's for all of you. So just whoever wants to speak to that.
I don't mind starting. I'm sure others will have much to say. I would say that, like, if you're not an expert and you lack the confidence, absolutely do engage with experts. Like, people want to do that. Scientists, this is the work they're doing, the research they're undertaking. We know that universities now, they think in terms of impact, and by working with museums, they can make that impact. They're not just communicating within their kind of specialist field. So absolutely do work with them. But I would say, as museums, have confidence in the skills that we have. I mean, we are experts at interpretation and communication, which actually many of the experts aren't. So it's about being able to work together to get those messages across. And my other tip, just the one about making it local, making it really relevant to what people can see in their locality. It does make an impact when David Attenborough does a documentary and we see what's happening to turtles, for example, in another part of the world, but it can seem quite abstract and not really relevant to our own lives. So connect it with the locality as well. And that will give you some hooks, which I think provide a sort of help if you're lacking in confidence, because you can make it more tangible.
Thanks, Hannah. Some great advice there. Did anybody else, Kinvara, did you want to say anything on this?
just that I think not being an expert can really help. I just, as what Hannah was saying, and I think when you look through the research and the data that Climate Outreach and Common Ground have both done, the stats, the statistics, the numbers, that's what turn people away and what make people come in and come to you and believe in what you're saying, and wanting them to find out more other stories and the storytelling. So I don't think you need to be an expert to be great at that, because that's what you all do every day. And then if you need the data to inform how you tell those stories, then the data is out there, and then you can find that. But yeah, I don't think you need to be an expert.
I think that's right. We are experts in storytelling, and that's what's really important in this, isn't it? It's the bit that we found in our research that turns people off is the stats. It's the doom and gloom. It's the, oh, we need to do something or we're all going to burn. That doesn't work. What we need to offer people is hope, and hey, we can do something. We can make a difference. This is what we can do. And something we've learned, not just from this exhibition, the Rewrite the Future one, but some of the experiments we've done over 4 or 5 years, some of the things that haven't worked have been we're all going to burn, we need to do something. That's not the route to go by. Those stories of hope and inspiration are what we need to offer. Optimism is a really key thing.
Thanks, Paul. I've got a question for Hannah now that's come in through the chat. There's someone who's interested in hearing a bit more about the interpretive challenges and approaches for the upcoming invasive species exhibition. Is there anything you can share on that?
Yeah, I think it's there are certainly challenges, because I said it's linking in with a conference at Queen's University, where obviously you've got the real experts will be there. But this, because it's in our museum where we have a really broad, diverse audience, we have to think about how we're making it relevant to them. I think we have learned a lot from Wild Island, and we'll be deploying some of the same techniques. I think we also, it's where the exhibition's going to be, it's somewhere that's slightly off the main visitor route. And so we definitely want to connect it back into our collections and our research that we're undertaking in the museums. So it's going to be a photographic exhibition. So we'll be able to, as well as the photographs of the invasive species, we'll be able to kind of show the research that's going on. And we're also talking to our programming team, so making sure that the exhibition doesn't just stand in isolation. There's different kind of programs of activity that go along with it, that can hopefully engage different audiences.
Thanks very much. I've got a couple of questions for you, Matt. So I'm going to ask them together, and maybe you can pick out what you want from it. So one question is that somebody would love to hear more about the evaluation process for the exhibition and how this worked. And another is, how did you make sure the museum generally was practicing what it preached, what it was preaching, sorry, in the exhibition on the environment and sustainability. And then, for example, a gallery, they can't remember which one, was criticised after hosting an exhibition on animal exploitation while running a cafe that was serving meat to visitors. So yeah, I guess, how do you balance that?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, evaluation is, again, one of these things we refined over a number of years. Working on one of the things when it comes to change we have not cracked is getting follow-up data from visitors. I'm sure lots of people here have the same issue. Getting people to say 2 or 3 months down the line, I made this change. We get a bit of that, but not enough for it to be usable as data. It's indicative that yes, people are changing, but it's not enough. So one of the things we do, we use exit surveys that follow a theory of change model. So if there's peer-reviewed research out there that says if a visitor has done X, Y, and Z, they're very likely to make a change. So one of those things is they think the change is worthwhile. They think that change is realistic. They can do it, and they feel optimistic about wanting to make a difference. It will have an impact. And there's something else that I can't quite remember. If you tick those boxes, they're very likely to make a change. So we try and record that data and then rely on the peer-reviewed research to jump to the conclusion that they're very likely going to make a change. We can't be certain that they will, but they're very likely to. The other thing that we do a gallery observation so we can understand why, what is it that we've done that has had an impact. So we had an exhibition, for example, where one of the changes we wanted people to make, like 5% of visitors said they would, were indicating they would do it. We thought, well, that's totally different to the other asks within that exhibition, which were all sitting at around 50%. And actually, our gallery observations told us that's because we put that in a dark corner. It was as simple as that. So the gallery observations help us understand what we were doing right and wrong that lead us to those conclusions. In Rewrite the Future, the data we collected from the game has also doubled as an evaluation tool, so we can see what people are willing to do. So people didn't kind of realize they were being evaluated. It didn't collect any personal data, just to be clear about that. But as part of the game that we've built into the exhibition, we're then able to analyze that data and understand what changes people are willing to make. And that game is based directly off the exhibition itself, so we can see the impact that's happening there. In terms of how we practice what we preach, I mean, this was something that the St Andrews the Centre for Critical Sustainability challenged us on. So you will all know temporary exhibitions can be incredibly wasteful. A typical temporary exhibition for us was resulting in about a skip worth of landfill. And they said, hey, you're talking about societal change, then this is part of the system. You need to change that system. So we worked with Studio Arc, which is an Edinburgh-based design company. And when we were putting out the tender for that, we said sustainability is really important. We want 80% of this build to be recyclable or to be reusable for a specific purpose. So we're not just shoving it in a storeroom and saying, yeah, we might use that one day. We know what we're going to reuse it for. And they led us to using a material called Zanita, which is like a structurally sound cardboard. And we built chairs out of it. You could see it in one of the images that I put on the screen. We built workbenches out of it. You could lean on it and write, the feedback cards. We made interpretation panels out of it. We built walls out of it. This stuff, I mean, it's incredible. This stuff is already partially recycled. It is fully recyclable. So it all went back to the manufacturer and they recycled it. And it also takes a lot less carbon to make. So we reduced our landfill from a skip to a bin bag off the back of that exhibition. And we think that we reduced our carbon cost by about 75% compared to a typical exhibition. So we tried our best to practice what we preached, and that has led into a lot of learning for our future exhibitions as well. So we're just this week opening a new exhibition where we've used that Zanita again, which is helping us to reduce the carbon cost and the landfill of that exhibition.
Fantastic, thanks so much.
India, sorry, could I just come?
Yeah, please do.
Just to build on something that Matt said and what people were talking about in the comments as well. First of all, Matt, that's an incredible carbon reduction. Well done. That's a huge effort from you and your team. I think it's important to also remember, which we are all doing, that the climate and nature crisis is an incredibly wicked problem that's incredibly complex and very difficult and can be very difficult to solve. And I think sometimes perfectionism gets in the way of progress, and often the people who criticize you as an organization for an exhibition that you're doing or the way that you're doing it is because they are copying the tactics of the big oil companies and polluters that we have in our system, who go out and attack any imperfection that they see in what we are doing. So I would say don't be scared to be perfect. None of us are, and every little bit helps. And so trying to act perfectly isn't, as Matt said, you have to embrace the failure, and I think it's would be a really important sentiment to go forward with in this space. And I would hate to think that being worried about being criticized would then stop you from doing something good. So yeah, I just wanted to build on that.
Thanks, Maria. I think that's a really important point. So thanks for sharing that. We've got a couple of questions that I'm going to pose to everybody. So the first one is, when it comes to museum audiences, are we preaching to the converted? And if so, how do we broaden the conversation? And the next one is, how do you balance the line of being hopeful and offering optimism in what we can do without putting the onus on fixing climate emergency on individuals? For example, avoiding the carbon footprint terminology invented by oil companies. So I'll pose both those questions to everyone, and I guess you can speak to whichever one you feel you can speak the most to. Hannah, do you want to start?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about the broadening the conversation one, and I had 2 points to make, and one of them, I see someone's responded to the question in the chat. I wholeheartedly agree that education is absolutely critical. I think our education visitors are the broadest kind of socioeconomic demographic of any of our visitors, and getting in young people at that stage when they're still kind of learning, they're still forming their own ideas is really critical. And our education program is such an important part of what we do. Our natural sciences education officer works across the Ulster Museum with our natural sciences collections, and the Folk Museum as well with outdoor learning, so mini beast hunts, etc. And he said he's often quite shocked with how little these children know about the natural world. And he talks about, for example, like a child gets stung on a nettle, and he talks about like a dock leaf, and they just they don't even know what a nettle is, they don't know what a dock leaf is. So really important to education to start that at an early age. So that was one point. And the other is seek opportunities to feed into wider policy and strategy that are going to kind of make a difference and reach a wider audience. So for example, here in Northern Ireland, our Department for the Environment has got a new nature recovery strategy, and it's out for consultation at the moment, and we are preparing a response as an organisation. So seek those opportunities where you can use the work you're doing and what you've learned from that, but take it beyond your own audiences.
Thanks, Hannah. Anybody else want to answer either of those questions? Kinvara?
Well, just to add on the how do you get the balance of the hope and optimism without making it the responsibility of individuals, I think that's such an important point, and one that we've been thinking about a lot as well. And an activity that I do with kids and with young people, linking to the education part, is whenever we talk about the climate and nature crisis, I'll just ask the question, so who benefits from you feeling this way, or who benefits from you thinking this? And I think having that as a question that you can pose in your exhibition or your museums and your galleries without giving an answer, then enables people to realize and come to their own conclusions. What the young children can come to and conclude from that is incredibly powerful. And so I think it's when you pose that question, it then ignites their own kind of curiosity in people, and they can come to their own conclusions on that. And the data shows that once people have taken their first action and they've made something happen themselves, they are then more willing to participate in the political system to change things as well, because we know it's policy at scale that is the huge work that we need. So I think it's we can use our museums and our galleries as opportunities to showcase the impact that those policies then have and how they're affecting and impacting people. And I think that's how we can get the balance between the hope and the optimism, and then making it not individuals' responsibility to solve a crisis that they have played such a small part in.
Matt, did you want to add anything into the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question about preaching to the converted is a really good one, because who's going to come to an exhibition about climate? It's probably going to be those who are more inclined to agree with you and more inclined to be doing things already. One of the things we've done in some of our experiments is try pitching our asks, so what we want people to do differently at different levels. So some of our asks at kind of an introductory level for those who maybe haven't thought about trying to live sustainably before, but also some of them at those who were already really committed to this stuff, and how can you go further. The other thing we've explored is getting climate messaging into exhibitions that are not about the climate explicitly. So we had an exhibition a couple of years ago about science fiction and exoplanets, which are planets outside our solar system, and how science fiction helps scientists explore different planets. And putting climate messaging into that. So around one of the big things in science fiction is, when we destroy this planet, we can go and live on another planet. I think Elon Musk says that sometimes, doesn't he, as well? But that allowed us to explore in an exhibition that wasn't about this issue, the question of, well, is there a planet B? If there's not, how do we protect this one? And that was a really interesting experiment in how different people responded, because we definitely had people coming to that exhibition who were not switched on to discussions around climate and sustainability. So that's one thing that's worth exploring as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much to all of you. That's been a really interesting discussion. I'm going to draw the discussion to a close here just because we want to put everybody into breakout rooms just shortly so that we can continue the conversation between each other. So maybe if there's any questions that were unanswered, you might have a chance to explore them a bit further in those breakout room discussions. When we go into the breakout rooms, it's really a chance for you to network and learn from each other. And the questions that we're going to ask you to consider are: what role can the museum you work in or with play in helping people imagine a better future? And how could you put people at the heart of the stories you share about climate justice? So I'll just pop those questions in the chat so that you have them. And very shortly, Rebecca will be putting you into breakout rooms, and we'll have 15 minutes for those conversations, and then we'll come back together to feedback. So thanks so much, everyone.
Fab, I'm just going to open all those breakout rooms now for you, India.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'll just give it a few moments for everyone to return. Great. So welcome back, everyone. I hope we all had really interesting discussions in your breakout rooms. I would love to hear some of what came out during the conversation. So please do share it in the chat function, some of the key points that came out of discussions, but also if anyone's feeling brave and wants to unmute, please do put up your hand. We'd love to hear from you. Maybe to kick us off, Kinvara, I'm just going to pick on you. I wonder if there was anything that interesting that was said in your breakout room.
Thank you, India. Yeah, we arrived to the group, and then everyone shared some of the things that they're thinking about, or what some of the challenges are that they have. And so then we started thinking about, okay, so what are the things that are common here? We spoke about how there was a museum in Salisbury, a museum in Cornwall, and thinking about what are the aspects of the local surroundings that people are interested in or want to focus on. So we spoke about how rivers have become central to some of their museum work, but they're going to be talking about the same within the museum in Cornwall, thinking about being near the beach. So that is going to be a route that they start to engage the community and the audience around. And then we spent quite a bit of the time at the end talking about young people and children, and how you need to change the messaging for young people if they are coming to your exhibition in your spaces, and how that might need to be different from what adults might be expecting from an exhibition in this space.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Kinvara. Yeah, I think that back to the points that you made at the start about knowing your audience. I think that's key. Does anybody else want to share anything that came out? I can see Bridget in the chat has shared that the concept of narrative hospitality and questions about having to constrain personal political views, the challenges of being sustainable in large and old buildings, religious and heritage offerings, and multifaceted ways to do with well-being and care for nature. And yeah, that's fantastic. So yeah, do you want to come off mute and expand on any of that, Bridget?
I'm kind of recording what others said that was interesting, really. So Hannah mentioned this notion of narrative hospitality, and I thought that was a great phrase for the idea of, you know, creating a space for multiple different perspectives and allowing pluralistic storytelling. And I wondered, I didn't ask Hannah if that is actually something that's emerged out of Northern Irish issues, if it's quite specific to that context. So yeah, our discussion was kind of relating to these themes about religion, neutrality, and so on. Yeah.
Fantastic. Hannah, did you want to respond to that at all, in terms of whether that is Northern Ireland?
I suppose, yes, it absolutely does come out of our work on peace building and the legacy of the conflict here. But I think it's applicable to all aspects of our work. And we talked a bit about we talked about like the difficulty of like you have views as an individual, but what does that mean in the context of an organization? And we were talking about like different groups, like activists have a real role to play in communicating climate justice, but so do scientists, and they do that in very different ways, and they're not always as successful at museums as doing that. So a museum is a space where all those different kind of views and perspectives, ways of working can come together. And I think that's what we were thinking of. What role can the museum play that potentially others can't?
Fantastic. Thanks, Hannah. And I can see in the chat as well, Katie, you've mentioned a little bit about folklore in storytelling. I don't know, did you want to expand on anything that you've popped in the chat? I know, Lucy, I know you've responded. I know you do lots of work around this and intangible cultural heritage. I don't know if that's anything that you want to speak to, just to finish.
Yeah, I can do. Our group talked a lot about actually it's not always a bad thing to preach the converted, and sometimes you want to bring in those groups who are already doing really great work so that newer audiences feel they've got someone to go to when they leave the museum, which we talked about a little bit. But yes, I am a big fan of using intangible heritage and kind of tradition bearers and Indigenous knowledge to bring back that connection to landscape and understand our connection with it throughout history. And our group talked a little bit as well about parallels in kind of migration stories between people and through nature, and throughout the existence of humanity, people have always migrated because of natural resources, and that is a positive story that we see throughout human history of survival as well as through nature. And yeah, and I love using folklore to explore all of that as well, and especially I can't remember who it was, apologies. Someone earlier, might have been Hannah. Someone earlier was mentioning, kids who don't know what a nettle is, and actually sometimes we can use folklore and tradition bearers to help bring back those intrinsic and kind of natural knowledges and remedies, and having fun in nature again, and not always it's something dirty and you need to clean it and keep it like sterile. Actually, you can have fun and make a mess, and yeah, it might hurt you, but then you can find a way to, the cure will be out there in nature as well.
Yeah, I love that. The idea of having fun in all this, I think, is important. And Katie, you've got your hand up. We'll go to you for the last word in the last minute that we've got. If you've got something.
Sorry, it's Clodagh.
Oh, Clodagh, apologies.
Sorry, yes. It's Clodagh because I we received this lovely animated film based on Irish myths, the myth of Fionn McCool and the Salmon of Knowledge. And then, and she actually asked, would we share it with people that we know that might be of interest to them. And I think if you wanted to get in touch with this girl, Katie Lawler, you'll see her YouTube video. It's really beautiful, but it looks at the salmon and whether they will in the future be able to come up the river, you know, what the future holds. So, and what the myth, and it tells it in a really nice way in about 3 minutes. And it's just so beautiful. It's like little ideas here. So that's why I shared it. That's it. And we have a lovely breakout room as well. So thank you very much. It was nice to meet new people.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Clodagh. So I think we're just going to wrap up there, but I just want to say thank you very much to all of our speakers and also to everyone who's joined today for your contributions. It's been an excellent discussion. The MA has a few forthcoming events that you might be interested in. For example, our popular in-person event on exhibition design is on the 18th of March, and we've got our annual online conference exploring how museums can become anti-ableist on the 20th of May. So please do check out our events page for all future events. An evaluation survey will be dropping in your inboxes around about now, so please do let us know what you'd like to hear about if we run this event again. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.